Welcome back to the channel, and before we look at the accusation against Vatican II, I will first read you the text in question. Nostra Aetate begins by saying that people from different religions have certain things in common. Different religions try to answer the same question about who we are as people. What is the meaning of our lives? What is good? What is bad? What about suffering, death, judgment, retribution, reaching true happiness? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Religions have struggled to answer these questions. And then the text says, in Hinduism, men contemplate the divine mystery and express it through an inexhaustible abundance of myths and through searching philosophical inquiry. They seek freedom from the anguish of our human condition, either through ascetical practices or profound meditation or a flight to God with love and trust. So it says that in Hinduism they contemplate the divine mystery. That is true. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily doing it very well or that their religion is true. In Acts chapter 17, St. Paul declared to the pagans that their unknown God they worshipped was the creator of the world, and that even some of their poets said that we are his offspring. They actually contemplated a divine mystery here. But that doesn't mean that they did so perfectly or that St. Paul approved of paganism. Of course not. He wanted them to convert, to become Christian and leave the false religion of paganism. And yes, Hindus express it through myths and philosophical inquiry. That is true. And they seek freedom through ascetical practices and meditation. That is true. It is literally just reporting what they believe and do. It doesn't mean they do it very well. It doesn't mean that Hinduism is a legitimate path of salvation. Nostra Aetate then continues by saying, again, Buddhism, in its various forms, realizes the radical insufficiency of this changeable world. It teaches a way by which men, in a devout and confident spirit, may be able either to acquire the state of perfect liberation or attain by their own efforts or through higher help, supreme illumination. The text says that Buddhism realizes the insufficiency of this changeable world. That is true. Then it says that Buddhism teaches a way for men to acquire the state of perfect liberation or supreme illumination. This is true. Buddhism teaches this. It doesn't mean that they do so successfully and that this is salvific. It literally just says what Buddhism teaches. You can literally sit here and say that some cult out there teaches union with God in some way. Nostra Aetate's point is that these things reflect a ray of that truth which enlightens all men, and that the Church must proclaim Christ the way, the truth, and the life, in whom men may find the fullness of religious life, in whom God has reconciled all things to himself. Hinduism or Buddhism reflects merely a ray of the truth. It doesn't teach these things successfully. It is not salvific. And lastly, Nostra Aetate says that, likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways, comprising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. Other religions propose ways of countering the restlessness of the heart through teachings, rules, and sacred rites. Do they do that successfully? No. Are their sacred rites sacred in the eyes of a Christian? No. In the eyes of God? No. Do they do these things salvifically? No. Does Nostra Aetate suggest otherwise? No. So now that we have the normal, faithful Catholic interpretation of the text in mind, now I will show you how Dr. Taylor Marshall read into the text repeatedly by claiming that the text says that these other people do these things salvifically, that they are successful, etc. I am just going to highlight certain parts to illustrate this in order to save some time, but for the full unedited commentary by Dr. Taylor Marshall, you can watch his original video between these timestamps on the screen.
And somehow Hindus who aren't baptized, who don't recognize Jesus Christ, they're contemplating the divine mysteries. Bummer. Someone should have told St. Gregory Nazianzus Someone should have told St. John of the Cross, hey, bro, try out Hinduism. It's working. Then Vatican II and Nostra Aetate talks about Buddhism. This one really gets me. This one gets my goat. Whoa, Vatican II. That's quite the endorsement of Buddhism. What a commercial for Buddhism. According to Vatican II, Nostra Aetate, they can have a devout and confident spirit and may be able to acquire the state of perfect liberation. I mean, not even St. Paul, the apostle, could get that state of perfect liberation. He says he continues to strive and run the race, lest he be disqualified. That's what he said in the New Testament. But Buddhists, according to Vatican II, they can acquire a state of perfect liberation without baptism, without the Eucharist, without confession. Wow. Buddhism must be really special, Vatican II, and can attain by their own efforts supreme illumination. That's the heresy of Pelagianism. How can a Buddhist, by his own efforts, get supreme illumination, Vatican II? This is false. This is not true. This is not true. Nostra Aetate is not true. Then he goes on to talk about other religions. This is Vatican II, quote, likewise, other religions found everywhere try to counter the restlessness of the human heart, each in its own manner, by proposing ways, compromising teachings, rules of life, and sacred rites. End quote. This is a little bit more ambiguous, but really, do we want to say that other religions, that their teachings, rule of life, and their rites are proposing a way of salvation?
So you see how Dr. Taylor Marshall interprets these texts like liberal? Instead of the normal faithful Catholic interpretation we already went through, Taylor Marshall interprets the text like a liberal and denounces it and accuses an ecumenical council of teaching heresy. Essentially, Nostra Aetate talks about what other religious groups do, without saying that they do these things with success, in grace, salvifically. Dr. Taylor Marshall read all of those things into the text. So here on the right side, we have this normal, traditional, and faithful Catholic interpretation of an ecumenical council. And here on the left, we have an uncharitable, untraditional, liberal, unfaithful interpretation where we read things into the text in order to accuse an ecumenical council of heresy. Which interpretation do you think should a normal, faithful Catholic adopt? And if for some reason you are left undecided, well, I have good news for you. The Church has already told us how to interpret Nostra Aetate. In 1985, Pope St. John Paul II convened an extraordinary synod, and they told us that special attention must be paid to the four major constitutions of the Council, which contains the interpretive key for the other decrees and declarations. In other words, the four major constitutions of the Second Vatican Council help you interpret the other 12 documents at Vatican II. Lumen Gentium is one of these four major constitutions. Lumen Gentium will help you interpret Nostra Aetate correctly. Just read Lumen Gentium 13 to 17, where it emphasizes that the Catholic Church is necessary for salvation. You need faith, you need to be baptized, you need to become Catholic. If you knew that the Catholic Church is necessary for salvation, and you refused to become or remain a Catholic, you will not be saved. Vatican II doesn't say that other religions are valid paths of salvation, that their religions are salvific. No. Lumen Gentium continues to say that the gospel has to be preached to everyone. People are obligated to evangelize. People need to become Catholic. Now with this in mind and we look at Nostra Aetate, we see that, oh yeah, the godly, traditional, faithful Catholic interpretation is true. The ungodly, unfaithful, untraditional, liberal interpretation, making an ecumenical council guilty of heresy, by reading things into the text is wrong. What a surprise, who would have expected that? This nonsense interpretation of we endorse Hinduism and Buddhism, these are options of salvation, we approve of heresy, is a scandalous and garbage interpretation. I don't mean to be harsh, but it is garbage. There is no other word to describe it, at least no polite words. These things need to be called out as they are. We cannot, as faithful Catholics, tolerate this ungodly behavior. Taylor Marshall is making use of the Protestant spirit. He judges the magisterium of the Church apart from the magisterium itself. The Church's position is that these texts are consistent with tradition. In other words, the Church, the one who guards and interprets tradition, says that Vatican II is consistent with tradition. But I guess the layman, Dr. Taylor Marshall, is in a more authoritative position than the Church. I must have missed the update to the Profession of Faith where it says that I believe everything contained in the Word of God, whether written or handed down in tradition, as interpreted and expounded by Dr. Taylor Marshall and mediated through him. But anyways, since when is it Catholic to accuse an ecumenical council of teaching heresy? Dr. Taylor Marshall might say, but Vatican II is only a pastoral council. It didn't teach us anything. Vatican II approved of heresy, but it didn't teach heresy. Actually, Vatican II did teach with regards to faith and morals, but I will cover that in a future video. If you accuse Vatican II of approving a heresy like Pelagianism, the magisterium of the Church, expressing itself through an ecumenical council, taught it as being true. If you approve of it, you are teaching it as being true, and it is a teaching for the faithful. The idea that the magisterium can teach heresy non-definitively doesn't make sense. Non-definitive teachings are fallible by definition. They can be wrong, but they won't be wrong to the extent of being a heresy. The magisterium will not teach the faithful to hold to something heretical, even non-definitively. It would be harmful to souls. It will always be theologically safe to hold to what the magisterium proposes, even non-definitively. Holding to non-definitive teachings of the Church is theologically safe. Theoretically, it could be wrong, but it is still theologically safe. Accusing Vatican II of heresy is saying that it is not safe to follow the magisterium of the Church, which severely damages the entire point of having a magisterium. So will you follow the faithful Catholic interpretation of Vatican II, or will you follow Dr. Taylor Marshall?